Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Foreign Correspondents Club of Japan. My name is Fred Varco, a member of the Professional Activities Committee. Before we start, can I ask everybody to turn off their phones, their keitai, or set them to silent mode? We have 3 speakers today, and we have the interpretation of Mary Joyce on the end. Our speakers are from the end, Kwak Jinwoong, co-representative of the Utoro Private Fund, Tagawa Akiko of the Utoro Peace Memorial Museum, and Tomimasu Shiki, a lawyer for victims of the Utoro arson case. I assume everyone's aware of this case. Utoro is a small area in Kyoto-fu, which is trying to reconcile Japanese and Koreans, but obviously in the face of some hardships. So we're going to have a short presentation and 3 speakers, and after that we can ask questions. So first up is Tagawa-san. どうぞ。
今日はお集まりいただいてありがとうございます。まず最初に、ウトロの人々のお顔を見ていただきたいと思って用意いたしました。どうぞ。
Thank you very much for being here today. As we begin, I would like to first share with you some of the faces of the people of Utoro. So please take a look at the screen.
ありがとうございます。短くは本当に去年の11月まで生きていらしたウトロの一世の方たちの写真を見ていただきました。私はウトロを守る会をほぼ37、8年続けてまいりましたが、あの方たちの住まい、あるいは人権を守るために一生懸命頑張ってまいりました。で、住まいの方は戦争によって生まれた町でしたが、前のバラックはすべて取り壊されて市営住宅が建ちました。で、来年の春には2期棟が建つことになっています。
Thank you very much for viewing this. The photographs that you've just seen now are faces of first-generation residents of Utoro. The most recent being someone who was together living until November of last year. I have been involved in the Association to Protect Utoro for around 37 to 38 years now, working to protect both the lives and housing and also the human rights of the people of Utoro, and dedicating or making efforts as much as possible during this time. As to the home situation, the housing situation of the people in Utoro, this was indeed an area that was born as a result or born through war. The original barracks which were there in the community have been destroyed and public housing built in its place, and it is expected or planned that in the spring of next year 2 housing units will be constructed.
今後、さっきご覧いただきました方たちの生きてきた歴史も町も思いもすべて消え去ってしまう、なかったことになってしまうというのが、私はこの日本人としてとても残念に思いました。それであの方たちを偲ぶことのできる、あるいはあの方たちの子孫の方たちがこれから生きていく上で勇気を得られる、そういう記念館を作りたいというふうに思いました。
And from now, these people that you have just seen, as a result of this reconstruction in the community, this rebooting, it would mean that their history, their community, their thoughts, their wills, their lives, and so on would be disappeared, or even as if made that it had never existed. As a Japanese person, this is something which I believe is extremely unfortunate. Therefore, we started the efforts to construct a museum to remember them or to commemorate their memory, and also so that their ancestors can gain courage from this facility.
かつて日本の社会でも ウトロに対して関心がありませんでした。で、彼らの母国である韓国でもウトロに対する関心は大変低かったんです。
In Japanese society, there was for many years little interest, almost no interest in Utoro. And even in Korea, the country of their origin, there was also very little interest.
ウトロの問題を海外に訴えていくときに、特に韓国で私はいつも申し上げた言葉がありました。それは日本の市民と韓国の市民が手を取り合って、あるいは韓国の政府と日本の政府が手を取り合ってウトロを救うことができれば、ウトロを守ることができれば、未来に対してこんな素晴らしい歴史の克服はない。皆さんどうぞ一緒にウトロを守る運動をやってくださいっていうふうに呼びかけました。
Whenever I have been appealing to people in the international community, or particularly in Korea, about issues related to Utoro, there are some words that I always say. This is that if citizens from Japan and Korea can take up hands together, if the governments of Korea and Japan can take up hands together in order to save and protect Utoro, there would be nothing so wonderful in regards to overcoming history and creating a future together. So let us work in this movement for that purpose.
実に長い間そのことが実現しそうにもありませんでしたが、ついに今年の春に実現いたしました。
For a very long period, this did not seem something that was achievable. However, in spring of this year, it was finally accomplished.
ミュージアムに来られた方たちがおっしゃるのが、在日の青年やおばちゃんたちがここに来て韓国人であることの誇りを持ちましたっていうことと、勇気をもらいましたっていうことがあります。
People who come to visit the museum say, or some people say that as either young people, young Zainichi people, or also elderly or grandmothers from the Zainichi community, they are able to come to the museum and feel both pride and courage in being a Korean.
で、多くの日本人はウトロのことを知らなかった。ここに来て初めてこういう人々が生きて子育てをして苦労をなさって差別を跳ねのけながら生き抜いてこられたのだということが初めて分かりましたという日本人のお声があります。
And as for the voices or responses of the Japanese people who come to visit the museum, many people say that they were not aware at all of Utoro, and they came, or by coming to the museum, they were able to, for the first time, learn of these people, to learn of how they had lived, raised children, struggled, and somehow survived through discrimination in the community. And this was the first time for them to learn about this, visiting the museum.
小さな記念館ですが、150人のボランティアが登録して運営しています。
It is a rather small museum, however, it is being run by 150 volunteers who have registered to support.
ボランティアのメンバーは韓国人あり、在日、あるいはいろんなバックグラウンドを持った人がたくさん集まって、で皆さんが共通しておっしゃるのが、今までウトロの問題は他人事だった。それがボランティアに参加することで初めて自分のこととして捉えることができた。そのことがとても嬉しいっていうふうにおっしゃいます。
The volunteer members come from a variety of very diverse backgrounds, including some who are Korean of RK nationality, or also Zainichi Koreans as well. And the common thing which all of them say from their different backgrounds is that until now they had often seen the issues of Utoro as someone else's issue, as something not relevant to themselves. But by participating in the volunteering, they're able to experience and to recognize it as their own issue, and they're very glad about that.
この記念館の大事なコンセプトは、ウトロに生きた人々を伝える、ウトロに生きるということが一つ、それとウトロで出会う、このことが、この2つがとても大事な私たちのコンセプトなんですが、たくさんの人がウトロで出会っていらっしゃいます。で、私も私事ですが、40年近く前にウトロに出会いました。そして私は自分の人生を振り返って、とても豊かな人生だなと 自分で自慢しております。だから皆さんもどうぞウトロにいらして、ウトロでどうぞ出会っていただきたいと思います。
As for this museum, the particular important concept which we value is, of course, telling the stories of the lives of the people of Utoro. So looking at living in Utoro, but also meeting in Utoro, as this is a place for people to be able to come together and to meet. These are the values that we are really holding at the heart of this museum. We hope that many people will visit the museum in order to meet Utoro. Personally as well, since I indeed met Utoro 40 years ago, when I reflect upon my life since then, I think that it has been made very much richer, and this is something that I myself can be feel very proud about. So I therefore hope that many people will come and visit and meet Utoro.
ありがとうございました。
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Next, representing the Utoro Private Fund is Kwak Jinwoong. Please.
はい。今ご紹介いただきましたクワクチヌンと言います。私は、在日コリアンの3世、になります。で、今仕事は先ほど紹介ありました一般財団法人ウトロ民間基金財団の理事長を務めており、また在日コリアンの人権団体であるコリア NGO センターという NPO 法人の代表理事を務めております。
Thank you very much. As introduced, my name is Kwak Chinun. I am a third generation Zainichi Korean. I work both as the co-representative of the Utoro Private Fund, a citizens fund, and also of the non-profit organization called the Korean NGO Center, which is an organization working on human rights issues in related to Zainichi Koreans.
先ほどTagawa館長の方からもお話がありましたが、改めてこのウトロ平和記念館という施設の意味について私の方から少しお話をしたいと思います。
And to add on to the words that Ms. Tagawa has already mentioned, I would like to speak somewhat about the meaning or the significance of the Utoro Peace Memorial Museum.
ウトロというところはもともと日本の植民地時代に朝鮮半島から来た人たちが労働者として集められた場所です。
The area of Utoro has its origins in the Japanese colonial period, where it was a place where laborers from the Korean peninsula were living.
その人たちが戦後も日本の厳しい差別の下で力を合わせて生きてきた、そういう場所でもあります。
And it is a place where they continue to live in the post-war era in the face of very severe discrimination, supporting one another.
そしてウトロで苦労されてきた人々の生活を守ろうと在日の人たち、あるいは田川さんのような日本の市民、そして韓国の市民、多くの人たちが力を合わせてウトロ住民の人たちの生活を守った場所でもあります。
Utoro is also a place where Zainichi people, Japanese people such as Ms. Tagawa and citizens of South Korea also came together, citizens from Japan and Korea came together in order to protect the lives of the people of Utoro who had suffered so greatly, and as well bring their efforts together for this purpose.
その場所に建設されたウトロ平和記念館は、私たちは3つの意味を持つ施設と考えています。
We believe that the Peace Memorial Museum, which has been built here in Utoro, has three particular meanings.
一つは先ほど写真でも見ていただきましたが、高齢になったウトロ住民の人たちが心安らかに過ごせるコミュニティの中心としての役割、機能です。
The first is the function for, as you have seen in the photographs, for the elderly residents of Utoro to be able to come together as a kind of community center or hub for them to be able to come together and feel comfortable and at ease.
二つ目は、ウトロの歴史を伝えるための展示施設です。
The second is as a facility to display items which can convey the history of Utoro.
その歴史というのは、先ほど述べたように、日本の植民地時代の加害の歴史。
This history is, as mentioned, referring to Japan's history as perpetrated during the colonial period.
そしてその下での戦後も続く在日コリアンがさまざまな差別を受けながら生きてきた生活の歴史。
Further, it also tells of the history of the Zainichi Koreans living throughout the post-war era in the face of various discrimination.
そして3つ目は何よりも大事なことだと思うのは、そうした過去の戦争によるあるいは植民地支配による被害を住民そして市民が力を合わせて解決し、生活の安定安心を守ったその歴史ですね。
And the third meaning, and perhaps the most important of all, is to look at, first of all, the suffering or damage caused as a result of the past war and colonialism, but how residents and citizens were able to put their efforts together in order to resolve these issues and find a way to live together in peace and stability.
私たちはそういう歴史を学ぶことによって過去の歴史を乗り越えて新しい未来の関係を作っていくことができるというふうに確信をしています。
We believe firmly that by learning about and learning through such history, it is indeed possible to overcome the past and together build a new future relationships.
それがウトロ平和記念館という名前に込められた思いです。
And these are the hopes and the feelings included within the name of the Utoro Peace Memorial Museum.
そしてそういう学びを通じて出会い交流を深められる施設としてこの会館を活用していきたいと考えております。
And we also hope that this will be a facility that through such learning, meeting and exchange can be a way to deepen and develop in a further way as well.
で4月の30日にこの会館をこの記念館をオープンしました。
The museum was opened on the 30th of April.
その開館にあたって私たちは2つの日本国内の見方に直面をしたわけです。
And at the time of this opening, we were met with or we experienced two different responses from within Japan.
一つはこの施設の開館を非常に意義深く捉え、これを共に活用していきましょうという思いを持った人たちの姿です。
The first was the response of people in Japan very much seeing this initiative, the museum, as something meaningful and something which we can utilize, make use of together.
開館式には京都府の代表、それから宇治市長、京都府会議員、宇治市市会議員、大阪、そして東京の韓国総領事、多くの人たちが参加をしてくださり、共に開館を祝いました。
The opening ceremony was attended by representatives of the Kyoto Prefectural Government, the Mayor of Uji City, members of the Kyoto Prefectural Assembly and also the Uji City Assembly, and also the Consul General of the Republic of Korea from both Osaka and Tokyo, as well as many other people coming together to celebrate its opening.
一方で、インターネット等では、ウトロは土地を住民が不法占拠している場所である。日本の税金によってこういう施設を作るのはけしからん、許せないなどの差別排外的な言動でした。
However, at the same time, particularly online, there were comments saying that the Utoro is land in which people are illegally staying, that Japanese public funds should not be used for this purpose, and statements which were indeed very much discriminatory, exclusionary, and xenophobic in a way also.
昨年の8月30日にウトロ地区で放火事件が起こり、7棟の建物が全焼、半焼する非常に重大な犯罪が起こりました。
On August of the 30th last year, there was an arson incident in which 7 buildings in Utoro were either partially or completely burned down, a very severe crime.
その犯人は法廷で韓国人が憎かった。
The person responsible for this crime in the trial made the statement that he hated Koreans.
日本の税金を使ってこういう施設を作るのは許せなかった。
that he could not allow Japanese taxes to be used to make such facilities,
ウトロ平和記念館の開館を阻止したかった。
that he wanted to obstruct the opening of the Utoro Peace Memorial Museum.
そのように語りました。
These were the statements made by the perpetrator or the arrested person.
明らかなヘイトクライムだと私たちは考えています。
We believe that this is clearly a hate crime.
私たちはウトロ平和記念館がこうしたヘイトクライムを今後なくしていくためにも必ず必要な施設だと考えています。
And we believe truly that the Utoro Peace Memorial Museum is indeed a facility which is necessary for the purpose of preventing such hate crimes from occurring ever again in the future.
お互いが正しく理解し合い、そしてお互いの思いを分かち合うことで平和な日本、そして平和な日本と朝鮮半島の関係、そしてこのアジアの関係を作っていく、小さくてもそれに寄与できるような施設として今後充実させていきたいというふうに考えています。
We believe that it is a space which can indeed be used to create correct or accurate mutual understandings, to learn about each other's perspectives, and in order to make small but certain steps to contribute to creating a peaceful Japan, peaceful relations between Japan and the Korean Peninsula, and also relations with Asia.
ありがとうございました。
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And now Tomimasu-san will explain more about the Arson case. Thank you.
Actually, I'd like to spare the time for talking about Arson case for the Q&A session. Rather, I would like to briefly explain about the international perspective about the importance of this museum. We have come to realize since the opening of this museum, this museum's potential for making international contribution. Just one example, we constantly receive inquiries from university students about internship opportunities, and some from foreign students studying in Kyoto, and including them, English-speaking countries. We would like to welcome them, and so that they can learn at first hand about rich history of Utoro district and people's effort. And through these students and our effort through these students, they will hopefully foster empowerment in both direction, from Utoro to the world, and also from the world to Utoro. And such a it's I would also like to expand on what Ms. Tagawa and Mr. Kwak has explained to the importance of the gain international support other than Korea and Japan. The accused of the Arson case explained the motivation as Utoro district is invading territory. So in that sense, in essence, what he's saying is that Japanese territory is invaded by the Koreans. I think that image, false image, is created by taking advantage of in a distorted manner the bilateral cooperation between Korea and Japan. So we would like people to know that the support from the Korea did not come from the nationalistic motivation, something like protecting their own Korean nationals against Japanese courts' hostile decisions. No, that's not the case. That was not the case. The support was, in actuality, a natural endorsement of vibrant, universal civic support across border. They felt and supported universal human rights of Utoro people. So, and those personal convictions on individual level confirmed the validity of the preceding United Nations multilateral as opposed to bilateral international confirmation on our commitment would make it very clear that it's not an anti-Japanese activities of any sort. Rather, it's a human rights issue that is simply promoting the individual life of the people living in the district. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll go to questions and answers, but first I'd like to ask Tomimasu-san, just as it's question and answers, just explain a little about the status of the Arson case.
Okay. If you could turn to page 7 of the handout today. The handout could be distributed afterwards on the link by a link published on the YouTube video later. The Arson case, the first hearing at the Kyoto District Court was held on May 15th, and second on June 7th. And on the coming, the third hearing on June 21st, there will be a closing statement from defense side and from prosecutors. And victim will be able to make their own statement. Then in August somewhere, it will be scheduled at the next hearing. The judgment will be rendered.
Sorry, has he pled guilty?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, we'll go to questions and answers from the floor. If you have a question, please raise your hand, come to the microphone, and identify yourself, and if you have any affiliation to any media.
では質疑に入りますが、日本語でも英語でも大丈夫です。こちらの前のマイクの方からしていただきます。
Anybody want to ask a question? Please.
お名前とご所属の方もお願いいたします。
TBS の草壁と申します。田川さんにお伺いしたいんですけれども、今もちょっと放火事件についての話がありましたが、田川さん、これまでの法廷における被告の証言について、どのような印象を持っておられますでしょうか。
I am of TBS. I would like to ask a question of Ms. Tagawa. There was a reference now to the arson case. Would like to ask her impressions or thoughts in regards to the statements which have been made by the accused in the legal proceedings to date.
私には到底理解不能な言説を本人は言ってらっしゃいます。
He is making statements which to me are something which I completely cannot understand, cannot comprehend.
ただ先ほどの質問にお答えする代わりにウトロのおばあさんの言葉を紹介したいと思います。
And instead of using my own words, I would like to introduce some words of a grandmother of Utoro in regards to this.
大事な22歳で人生を棒に振ってしまってかわいそうなことや。
And she said that as a 21-year-old, someone who has his life in front of them, his important life, feels sorry for him for doing this to his life at this time.
韓国人がかなんなと思ったんやったらウトロに一回来てみたらよかったのに、そして一緒にご飯食べてお酒でも一杯一緒に飲んだらよかったのにって言いました。
And she said if he had these feelings or hatred about Koreans, he should have come to Utoro first, had a meal together, had a drink together, and then seen what Utoro is himself.
彼女の中は、心の中は悲しみと憤りでいっぱいだったと思いますが、ウトロのおばあさんはそう言うんです。一緒にご飯食べればよかったって。そういうのがウトロの人々の作っているコミュニティです。
I am sure that within herself she must have been full of both sadness and anger in regards to what happened. However, she still has these words. She says he should have come and had a meal together with us. And I think this demonstrates really the community that has been created by the people of Utoro.
とても許せない残念な事件です。
It is indeed a very unacceptable and unfortunate incident that occurred.
ただこれは本当に一部の話ではなくて、この日本の社会がはらんでいる一つの病のような気が私はして仕方がありません。
However, I don't believe that this is just one isolated incident, but we really need to look at this as indeed a pain or sickness that is existing now within Japanese society.
よろしいですか？
Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions from the floor? Okay, I'll ask the next one. You said, Tagawa-san, that you have people visiting from university students. What about younger people, like high school students and junior high school students? Do you have any visits from them? Can you just say something?
田川さんへの質問なんですけれども、先ほどその学生がその記念館を訪問されるなどというお話があったんですけれども、大学生よりも若い高校生または中学生などという訪問はございますか？もしあればどのような印象など、どのようなお言葉を聞きますでしょうか？
嬉しいことに若い方の訪問がたくさんあります。それで私たちは記念館を作るときに中学3年生あるいは高校1年生が読んですぐ分かる優しい日本語でというふうに努めました。で、それがその通り分かっていただいているのかなという喜びがあります。
We're very happy to say that indeed many young people are visiting the museum. When we were creating the museum and its displays, we made particular effort to write it in so-called easy Japanese or yasashi Japanese, which could be understood immediately by people around the age of third grade of junior high or first grade of senior high as well. And I'm very glad to say that by the responses of the young people who are visiting the museum, we seem to have been successful in this.
ウトロに生きていた人が感じられるようにという展示をしていますので、つい先日ですが家族連れで来られた方の、小学校2年生か3年生だと思います。その方が感想文に拙い字で「今日はウトロに来られてよかった」と書いてありました。
And we are aiming within the displays to convey the lives of the people of Utoro and to make this in a way that people can really tangibly feel. Just the other day, we had a visit of a family and their child who was probably of second or third grade in elementary school left the note of their impressions of visiting museum in their messy children's handwriting saying, "I'm so glad we came to Utoro."
Thank you. Any more questions, please? First, second, yeah.
こちらの方にも。すいません。
今日はありがとうございます。韓国の東亜日報のイ・サンウと申します。よろしくお願いします。最近のウトロ記念館、私は実際の開館式で行ったことあるんですけれども、ちょっと最近の日本の印象とか日本の空気としては、少しずつ何か右翼の声はちょっとどんどんちょっと大きくなる感じも少しずつあると思うんですけど、政治の雰囲気とかそういう雰囲気もあるというふうに、今ちょっと喋ってる方が結構多いと思うんですけれども、そういうふうな印象についてどのような印象を受けていくんでしょうか。
I'm a Korean reporter. I also visited the opening ceremony of the Utoro Museum. And I think that it could be said that recently, in the broader context in Japan, there is an atmosphere which seems little by little the voices of the right wing are becoming greater within Japanese society and also within the political situation as well. Would like to ask the speakers about their impressions or feelings about that broader context. それはどなたでもよろしいですか?
Okay, let's Kwak-san, you wanna
じゃあ、Kwakさん
address
先
that?
に。
はい。質問ありがとうございます。確かに今おっしゃったように、日本の右翼というより歴史修正主義、つまり、日本の過去の歴史をなかったものにする、 あるいは歪めてしまうような言動なんかがやっぱりかなり広がってきている、その中で過去のいろんな被害であったり日本のおかしさを否定することに対して攻撃的な人たちの声というのが大きいというのは現実としてあります。それがヘイトスピーチというような行動に現れたり、あるいはウトロだけではなくて、今も神奈川県川崎市でも毎月のようにヘイトスピーチが行われ、ヘイトクライムの被害が起こっていますが、日本各地でそういうふうな動きにつながっているというのが現実としてあると思います。それは非常に大きな問題だというふうに感じております。ただ一方で、2016年にヘイトスピーチ解消法ができましたし、そして、歴史修正主義的な過去の歴史を正しく見るべきだというような動きがですね、日本の中でもやっぱり広がってきているというのも事実としてあります。最近公開された映画で、教育と愛国という映画がありますが、それも一つの例だと思います。
Thank you very much for the question. I think that, as you said, indeed, these right-wing voices, or perhaps could refer to them as historical revisionist voices, are indeed becoming perhaps greater or spreading, looking at Japanese history and trying to either make it seem that things which occurred within Japanese history did not happen, or looking at things in a twisted or more biased perspective. For example, these voices becoming very aggressive in regards to statements about past damages or Japan's acts in the past as well. This is indeed the reality, and I think that this is being seen in, for example, the cases of hate speech and hate crimes, not only in Utoro, but also, for example, monthly hate speech or hate crimes which are being held in Kawasaki City in Kanagawa Prefecture, or also in other places throughout Japan as well. This is indeed a very large and serious issue, but at the same time, there is also, for example, the legislation in regards to hate speech, which was passed in 2016. Also more moves, I believe, to look at Japan's history in a more accurate perspective as well. Recently, there is a film which has just been released, which the title translates to Education and Nationalism, and I think that this is one example of how this understanding is being expanded.
ですから私は歴史修正主義あるいはマイノリティに対する排外的な動きに対してはですね、きちっと戦っていかなければならないと考えています。その戦っていくためにはやっぱ多くの人たちのやっぱ共感を得てで正しい知識を伝えていくということが不可欠だろうというふうに思います。そのためには時間をかけてもですね、きちっとお互いの相互理解を深め、ダメなものはダメということをきちっと伝えていくということが大切ではないかというふうに思っています。
Therefore, I believe that it is indeed necessary to stand up directly to these kinds of historical revisionism or exclusions and xenophobia against minorities in Japan. And in order to do so, it is necessary, or it is very much crucial to gain a broader empathy and understanding of many people within society and a more accurate understanding of facts as well. Of course, this is something which requires a great amount of time, but I believe that efforts in order to develop and deepen this kind of mutual understanding is necessary so that we can indeed say what is wrong is wrong.
Okay, does anybody want to add anything? Tagawa-san?
はい、私は日本人ですが、このヘイトの問題は対象になっている在日韓国人や朝鮮人に問題があってそういうことが起こるんではないんです。この日本人社会の問題であり、あえて言えば在日日本人問題だというふうに私は思っています。で、そのことを他人事じゃなくて自分にそれが降りかかった時のことを置き換えて考えるってことを多くの日本人はしなければ大変なことになってしまうなと心配しています。
I am a Japanese person, a Japanese citizen, and when we look at these issues of hate, I think it is very important to make clear to say that this is not something which happens because there is a problem on the side of the Zainichi Koreans or the people who are the target of such action. Rather, this is an issue of Japanese people, of our society. This is something which, rather than being a Zainichi Korean issue, I would say that this is a Zainichi Japanese issue, and we must look at it in that way as well. This is not something which is someone else's issue or someone else's problem. Rather, we as Japanese people, I think we need to reflect on ourselves. If we were the target of this, if this were something which would happen, or we were in these kind of shoes, what would we experience in that situation? And this is the kind of reflection and understanding that I believe that Japanese people must have. And if that is not done, I'm very concerned about what a grave situation might arise.
世界中で紛争が絶えないこの地球ですけれど、そこに住む子どもたちが私たちはここにいてはいけないのっていうふうな不安にさらされるようなことは決してあってはならない。それは別に日本だけじゃなくて、今紛争を抱えている、あるいは爆弾が炸裂しているところの子どもたちもそうなんですが、自分がここにいちゃいけないのっていうふうに思わせてしまうような社会は、その社会に問題がありますと私はそう考えています。戦争によって生まれたウトロの町は平和を祈って念じて平和記念館を作りました。それが平和記念館のメッセージです。
Around the world, of course, there are endless conflicts happening in different places around this earth. And we must not allow a situation where children living anywhere on this planet can feel that they're not allowed to be where they are, or to feel, oh, we're not allowed to be here, we shouldn't be here, any kind of fear or uncertainty. This is something, of course, not only for Japan, but for people living anywhere in the world, including children who are living under conflict or in places where bombs are exploding. This kind of society which allows children to be placed in the situation where they have to question where they are, there's a problem with the society itself. This is what I personally very strongly feel. Utoro is a place, a community, a town which was born as a result of the war, and it is for this very reason that we have created this museum with our message to convey of peace.
Sorry, I just want to follow that up with Tomimasu-san. We've been portraying this as talking about hate crime, and I think yesterday the Diet increased the punishment for hate crimes.
Yesterday?
I think it was yesterday. There was something in the Diet.
For insult.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you just give us more perspective or context about, is Japan doing enough to counter hate crimes?
First of all, may I speak in Japanese? It's probably will. 昨日でしたかね、国会が通したのは侮辱罪ですね。侮辱罪の量刑を加重しています。
So yesterday, what passed at the Diet was a heavier punishment in regards to crimes related to insult.
でこれはヘイトスピーチという、つまりマイノリティをターゲットにして、排除を目的とした像をぶつける表現という、意味でのヘイトスピーチに限らず、侮辱罪全般について、法定刑を改正したものだと理解しています。
And so I understand this as being a revision or adaptation made in regards to, or not being limited to insult or speech which is targeting or excluding people of minorities. So it is in regards to broader crimes of insult.
でヘイトスピーチに関して言いますと、今のところ被害者が特定されていない、発言に対して、集団であっても特定はされているんですけれども、独自に処罰をするという法律はありませんで、ありません。
Currently in Japan, in regards specifically to hate speech, there is no legislation for individual punishment of speech which is, or in which specified individual cannot be identified as the victim, even if they are identifying as part of a group.
ヘイトスピーチ解消法という法律は、あれは何年でしたかね、2016年にできてますけれども、地方公共団体とか政府に対して対策をするようにという抽象的な義務付けをしている法律であって、刑法的な処罰を課す法律とはなってません。
And the current legislation in regards to hate speech, which was created in 2007, includes wording calling for the government to take measures, or it includes an abstract obligation for measures against hate speech, but it does not include any criminal punishment as part of the legislation.
今回の事件は放火罪です。放火罪が、現行の刑法違反の放火罪が、差別動機、偏見動機に基づいて行われたという意味で、ヘイトスピーチではなくて、ヘイトクライムというカテゴリーに入るものです。
And the current arson case is as it is being tried as an arson case under the existing Japanese criminal law, rather than although it was based on the motivation of discrimination targeting minorities, it is based as a hate crime rather than hate speech within the legal context.
ヘイトクライムについて一律に裁判官が量刑を加重しなければならないという法律もありません。
And there is no law existing in Japan at the moment which has overall meaning that the judges need to have the severe criminal punishment in regards to the hate crimes.
ただし、刑事の裁判官は量刑を決めるにあたって広い裁量がありまして、こうした人種差別動機をどの程度量刑に反映させるか、これはその裁判体次第、今回3人の裁判官が審理してますけれども、裁判体がその事案で出てきた事情、証拠に基づいて、証明された事情についてどう評価するかというところで広い裁量を持っています。
And so in regards to the judgment which is made for criminal cases which are dealing with hate crimes as well, rather than specifying what kind of criminal punishment should be implied as part of this, the judges in these cases have the right for rather broad consideration. So looking at, for example, if there's a case as this one which has these racist motivations, discriminating motivations, how much this will be considered when making the judgment and deciding upon the punishment depends on the judges making the verdict. So in regards to this particular case, there are 3 judges who are involved or who will be making the judgment, and so they will be looking at how to evaluate this particular case based on the evidence which has been submitted and so on, and taking this broad consideration when they are making the judgment.
日本国はですね、人種差別撤廃条約を批准しておりますので、日本の裁判所政府機関として、人種差別に対してはその被害に照らして適正な処罰を確保する義務が明文で義務付けられてますので、きちんと差別をこの裁判の中で断罪できるかどうか、その点に注目をぜひ皆さんの報道機関も監視をしておいていただけるといいと思います。
Japan, as a state, has of course ratified international conventions for elimination of discrimination, racism, and so on. Therefore, it has the responsibility as part of these conventions for having suitable punishment in cases where this does occur as well. As for or to what level this is indeed included and represented within the judgment is something that we hope a broader public and also the media can pay attention to as the verdict is being issued.
Thank you. どうぞ。
神奈川新聞の石橋と言います。すみません、お答えが少し重なっちゃうかもしれないんですけれども、先ほどから、田川さんのお話で、このヘイトスピーチの問題、今の社会の問題はですね、その日本の病だというふうなお話がありましたが、放火という、明らかなヘイトクライムが起きてですね、いよいよその、こうした記念館のですね、意義が、とても意義深いものだなということが、明らかになっているわけですけれども、その日本の社会の問題として、 解決するべきやはり主体はマジョリティである、日本人であるべきだというふうに思いますが、その日本人が主体的にこの自分たちの問題を解決するためにこのできた記念館というものをどのように活用するべきなのか、でこのウトロで生きてきた人たちの何に学び、どう解決していくべきなのかということを一つ教えて、どのようにお考えになられているのか教えてください。あともう一つ、富松さんにですね、今のお話に関連してなんですがその、今回のウトロの放火事件も、犯人の供述からですね、ヘイトスピーチがヘイトクライムにエスカレートしていくというふうなことが明らかになっていますけれども、その意味でそのヘイトスピーチをですね、きちんと解消法ではなくて、規制していく、より強い法律が必要なのかどうか、あるいはそのヘイトクライムをですね、裁判隊の裁量に任せるだけではなくて、きちんとその裁量に反映させるようなに義務付けるですね、そうした法律を作る必要があるのかどうか、そのあたりのお考えを聞かせてください。
I have two questions. My name is Ichibashi of the Kanagawa Shimbun. Perhaps overlaps a little bit, but I would like to ask, first of all, of Ms. Tagawa. You mentioned about the situation of hate speech, hate crimes being a sign of the sickness within Japanese society today. Of course, this arson case is indeed clearly a hate crime, and I think this is making all the more evident the deep significance and meaning of the museum in today's Japanese society. Of course, in order to truly resolve this issue, this is something which the majority Japanese people do need to take up and take action to resolve as well. So I would like to ask your comments about how you hope for the museum in Utoro to be utilized by people within Japanese society from now, what it is that you hope that people will learn from the people of Utoro, and how you hope in the future for these kinds of issues to be resolved. The second question is for Mr. Tomimasu. I would like to ask in regards to the arson case, within the statements being made by the accused, it seems clear that it escalated from hate speech to hate crime as well. So do you believe that there should be stronger legal restrictions in place in Japan in regards to hate speech and in regards to hate crimes, for this to be not only left up to the broad consideration of the judges, but for legislation to make consideration of this within the judgments, within the verdicts are mandatory?
Okay, first question, Tagawa-san.
はい、ありがとうございます。特効薬があるわけでは私はないと思っているんです。私が振り返りましても、ウトロに初めて水道がないっていうことを知って入ったのが40年近く昔です。その時、私が行った時もお互いご苦労様ですとか、なんか腹の探り合いみたいな感じで、日本人がこの集落に入ってきてろくなことはないっていうふうに警戒がたくさんありました。で、私の方もドキドキです。でも振り返ってみて、私はそこでもっと知りたいと思った。そこからウトロとのつながりができてくるんですけれど、子どもたちが何にも知らされていないっていうことに私は気づきます。例えばウトロの問題で、宇治市で社会科の教科書の副読本があります。そこにウトロなんてとてもいい教材だと思うんですが出てこないんです。あるいは、ウトロのは水浸しになるところでしたから、その水を避けるために、かさ上げをすれば簡単なことですが、かさ上げを選ばなかったんです。それをしてもらったら、そのウトロに流れた水がみんな周りに行って周りに被害を及ぼす、そういう自分たちが嫌だったことが再び他の地域で起こるのはダメだから、何とかしてくれっていうことで、すぐ隣の中学校の校庭に地下プールを作ることを提案して、それが採用されました。で、両方から水を調節しながら流すようになったので、膝までの水害というのはもうなくなりました。ただ私はその時とても残念だったのは、その校庭に地下プールを使った中学がそのことを教育の中に全く取り入れなかったんです。で、子どもたちは、なんで校庭の真ん中に1年近くかけて大工事をやってるのか、校庭が使えないわけですから。だけどその時に学校としては ウトロがねこういうことになって大変だから地下プールを作ってそれで水害がないようにするんだよっていうふうに教育の場で教えれば子どもたちはそこでものすごい学びをすることになるんだけれど、日本の社会って得てしてそういうことをスルーしちゃうんです。ごめん、長すぎました。
じゃあそこまで一旦。I don't believe that there is any easy or simple immediate cure to this issue. When I first came to Utoro 40 years ago, it was a time that there was no water, no flowing water even there at the time. But coming to the community, the local people felt that, well, any Japanese people coming there, nothing good is going to come of that. They were very cautious of me and other Japanese who were visiting there, and I myself was very nervous as well. However, when I look back, I believe that I had this just very simple feeling of wanting to learn more, wanting to know more as well. And it was through this that I was able to build these connections with Utoro over the years. What I believe is very much of concern is that children are not told anything about Utoro or about history as well. For example, in the city of Uji, where Utoro is located, in the supplementary textbooks which are used in social studies classes, Utoro could be a great case study or material to be taught within these classrooms for children. However, there is absolutely no mention of it there as well. Utoro is an area also which suffered greatly from flooding over the years as well, and water damage. This was something which could be very easily avoided by having, for example, raising the land and so on, and very simple measures to be done. However, local neighboring communities did not want this to happen because then any water damage could potentially go to their areas as well. So this was a case of not wanting oneself to suffer any kind of problem, therefore not seeking a kind of resolution for neighbors as well. In the end, a solution was adopted in order to build an underground pool to gather water in the schoolyard of a junior high school located next to Utoro. And through the accumulation of water in there, adjusting the flow and the levels and preventing the water damage, which would even go to knee-height level at many times as well in Utoro. However, despite the fact that there was 1 year spent with the children seeing this construction happening in their schoolyard every day and this big sort of pool being built in the center of their schoolyard. Of course, they couldn't play in the schoolyard during that time as well. The children were not taught why it was that this was happening. It could have been the situation that within the education there, they could have said, well, this is being done to prevent this difficult situation in Utoro next door, and this is something which could have been a very much learning experience for the children there. However, within Japanese society, there is this tendency just to gloss over it without mentioning, without explaining this at all, and this was very much a lost opportunity by not explaining or teaching about these kind of situation. どうぞ。
すみません、FCCJ であることを忘れていました。
Sorry, I was forgetting that we're here at the FCCJ and kept speaking too much.
ごめんなさい。知って人々が交流することからしか始まらないというふうに私は思っています。で、教育の問題が一番大事だし、日本の子どもたちは不都合なことを教えられないで、美しい日本というふうになんか短絡するような気がするんですが、不都合なことでも自分の学校の隣にそういう集落があるということを教えるのはとっても教育のいい機会だと思うんですが、そういうことは少し日本の社会は足らないなと私は思っています。
I believe that the only way to make a difference, the only way to start is to first know and to then exchange. And from this process is the only way to make a change. Education is the most important for that as well. However, unfortunately here in Japan, children are not taught what is inconvenient. They are taught just this image of the beautiful Japan. So these children, even in this school right next to Utoro, are not taught anything about this community which is neighboring right there next to them. This is something which would be a very meaningful educational opportunity, but I think that this is indeed somewhere where Japanese society is lacking.
どうぞ記念館を活用してください。
I hope that you will all make the most of using the museum. So it would be good to have school visits. Please let us know if you would like to.
Tomimasu-san, you want to ask your question?
はい、 ヘイトスピーチの規制を、立法で実現、やっていくべきかどうかということについて、私個人の意見をお尋ねいただいていると思うんですけれども、ちょっと多分時間の関係で説明しきれないのでとりあえず今回の件で何がこの放火犯罪を起こしたのかというところで被告人が語ったことを少しお伝えしておこうかなと思います。一つはですね、家庭の中で親が、韓国人一般に対していい感情を持っていなかった。だから家庭内でそういう会話があることがあったとかで、あとは教員があまりいい感情を持ってなかったっていうのを、見て育ってきましたという発言がありました。
So in regards to the question on whether there should be stricter legislation in regards for restricting hate speech, I believe I'm being asked my personal opinion. Perhaps there's not time to explain in detail, so I'd like to speak specifically about in regards to this case. If we look at the statements of the accused himself, as to what led him to carry out this case. First of all, he has spoken or made statements in regards to his family being raised in a household where his parents did not have positive sentiments towards Koreans, and also at school having teachers also not with such positive statements or sentiments. He was raised in this kind of environment.
はい、で次に、彼はそのウトロ記念館を標的にしていくにあたって、非常に短い、10日間ぐらいという、説明だったと思うんですけども、インターネットを駆使してですね、調べて、不法占拠であるという結論を自身で導いて、で像を募らせたという過程があったようです。
And next, in regards to targeting Utoro and his motives for that as well, or targeting the museum, it was a very short period of time, actually only around 10 days from when he first heard or learnt of Utoro to when the act was committed. And he said that within this time, he read online, looked up information about Utoro, came to his own conclusion that it was an illegal occupation by the Koreans there, and this led to the expansion of his hatred.
はい、もう一個ちょっと、考える材料としてお示ししますと、彼は前回の法廷で全くだからヘイトスピーチを垂れ流したわけですね。一般的な見解、弁護人がこれは不法占拠じゃないですよっていうことを法廷で尋ねているのにもかかわらず、自分はそうは思ってないと、不法占拠だということを、繰り返し言い続けたわけですね。で、これら3つについて共通して言えることなんですけれども、家庭内での会話とか、3つについて共通というと言い過ぎですね。1つ目と3つ目ですね、法廷での発言、これはどういう、ここまで全て法規制する法律というのはありえない、実現はしない、憲法も明らかに憲法違反になってくると思うんですね。で、失礼。
And one other point which should be taken as material for considering as well is in the previous hearings at the court as well, he was stating over and over again that he also, or after the legal team said that the residence in Utoro was not an illegal occupation, he used hate speech to say that over and over again, this is not the case and it is illegal, and so on as well, repeating hate speech within the hearing as well. So what we can see that within the, in common between both the first and the third examples shared here within the household and the trial, is that it would be indeed not possible under the current Japanese constitution to restrict all of these kinds of statements from a legal perspective.
ですので、根本にある偏見、差別ですね、こういったものが残る限りはどうしても法律で処罰しきれない部分が残るということは前提にした上で議論をしていかなければいけない。そういう意味で平和記念館のような場所に人々がどうやったら自然な形で、上からで行けよと言われて 押し付けられていくんではおそらく逆効果になると思うんですね。なので自然な形で平和記念館と出会えるようなそういう工夫っていうのが求められているように思います。
But within a society, as long as this prejudice and discrimination, which is at the foundations of this kind of hate speech and so on, remain within society, it is not possible to make all such statements punishable under law as well. So what is needed now is within the broader discussion to look at how we can create the kind of environment where people will naturally go to places like the Utoro Peace Memorial Museum, not in a way where they are told to or ordered to go there to learn, as that may have the opposite result in fact, but create the kind of situation where people will naturally visit these places to meet and learn and so on. And this is the kind of measures which are necessary.
We are out of time. Do you have any more time? Or do you have to?
お時間にはなったんですけれ
We
ど
have a few
少し延
questions.
長してもよろしいですか。
Okay, we have a few questions from send in. This is from Ilgin Yoromaz from BBC World Turkish Service. She says, do you think reconciliation between Korea and Japan, presumably, should come from the top down, from the governments, or from the bottom up, i.e. from the public in both countries?
次オンラインの方でいくつか質問が届いていますので紹介したいと思います。まずオンラインで BBC ワールドのトルコ語版のイルギン・ヨルムズ記者からの質問なんですけれども、和解というもの、おそらく、日本と韓国もしくは日本と朝鮮半島の和解だと思うんですけれども、和解というものはトップダウンで政府同士から来るべきなのか、ボトムアップという市民同士から来るべきというふうに考えられますでしょうか。
This is kind of similar to a question I was going to ask about. Korean culture is very popular in Japan, and Japanese culture has been popular in Korea for a long time. So there is a bottom-up movement, I think. So how do you, maybe Kwak-san can answer, how do you compare that with the top-down movement?
そして関連の質問、司会からなんですけれども、韓国の文化が今日本で非常に人気がありまして、また逆に日本のもの、日本の文化も長い間韓国でも人気があると思うんですけれども、そういった文化交流などからのボトムアップという市民同士の流れ動きというものはあるんですけれども、そういった動きと政府同士のトップダウンという動きをどういうふうに比較として考えられますでしょうか。これは賀来さんの方でお願いします。
はい。日本と朝鮮半島の関係でいうと、和解という話がありましたが、過去の清算というふうに言ってもいいかもしれませんが、それをトップダウンで行うということが非常に難しいというのが実はこれまでの歴史だったというふうに考えています。1965年の韓日条約もそうでしたし、それから2015年の元慰安婦の方々をめぐる合意もやはりそうでした。トップダウンでは非常に難しい。したがって市民がそこに参加をしながらボトムアップで問題意識を深めて、それが政策としてきちっと形になっていくというのが最も望ましい流れだというふうに考えています。
In regards to, well, the word reconciliation was used, but we could also look at it, for example, as a settlement of the past issues between Japan and the Korean Peninsula as well. I think that history until now has shown that it is indeed extremely difficult for this to be achieved through a top-down approach. This could be said for the treaty between the Republic of Korea and Japan in 1965, also looking at the agreement made between Japan and South Korea in regards to the former so-called comfort women in the year 2015. We've seen that it's extremely difficult to have resolution of these situations from the top-down approach. However, within these difficulties, there has been various different movements led bottom-up by citizens in order to deepen awareness and then reflect this in policy. And I believe that this is the best flow or way for this to be achieved.
と今もう一つありました今の韓国文化あるいは日本文化の相互交流と政治の関係についてということですが、私は今の文化交流の流れというのは非常に好ましいことだというふうに考えています。
And in regards to the question about the mutual exchange and so on between culture of Korea and Japan and how this is connected with political relationships and so on, I believe that this kind of cultural exchange personally is something which is very positive.
私は大阪のコリアタウンで活動していますが、
I'm active in Koreatown in Osaka.
今は大阪でも有数の観光地となって年間200万人が訪れる場所になっています。
And this is indeed a tourist spot, a sightseeing spot now where annually 2 million people visit there.
私たちの団体だけでも年間1万人規模の学生たちを受け入れて教育プログラムを実施しています。
And our organization is also every year accepting 10,000 students who come for various education programs there as well.
ですから、文化を通じた交流、あるいは学びを通じた交流が広がっていくということと、それがやっぱ政治につながっていくということは当然重要なことだと思うんですが、
And therefore, having this kind of learning or exchange through culture and having that expand and somehow connect to the political sphere is something which is, of course, important.
どうも日本と韓国の今の関係というのは政治があまりに優先しすぎて、交流に対すればブレーキがかかってしまったりする傾向がやっぱり否めない、否定できない。
However, unfortunately, in the current situation of relations between Japan and the Republic of Korea, unfortunately, we cannot deny the fact that there is perhaps too much of an emphasis or weight being put on the political, and this is having the tendency to put the brakes on this kind of exchange.
ですから今は交流、文化の交流、そして経済の交流、人的な交流、これは活発に広げながら政治社会の問題をどう解決するかというのは時間をかけてきちっと議論を積み重ねていくという、そういう冷静なスタンスが必要ではないかというふうに考えています。
And therefore, I believe that what is necessary now is to look at how to actively expand more cultural exchange, economic exchange, and also human exchange, while at the same time taking the necessary time to look at how to resolve the various political and social issues and to have thorough discussion and a calm stance in order to do so.
Okay, we are finished. I want to thank our interpreter, Mary Joyce, for an excellent job, and our guests, Tagawa-san, Kwak-san, and Tomimasu-san, for their very informative speech today. Thank you very much. We're finished.
ありがとうございました。
Thank you. ありがとうございます。I had one more question.